It's the Radio Don Podcast. I am the aforementioned. Welcome to whatever this is. This is being recorded on the 7th day of May. Actually, the 6th day of May. It was Cinco de Mayo. May 6, 2026. Get the commercials out the way. Please follow wherever you are. Please follow us on Substack and on YouTube, which is where this piece of business is going today. Please comment wherever appropriate. Please share this wherever appropriate. We're trying to raise $500 this month to basically take care of some pressing matters and also to improve the podcast. At least you know where the money's going. The GFM is located at bit.ly/radiodon. That's bit.ly/radiodon71. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll try to keep this under 6 minutes. The last few days, I've been bombarded with invitations to send me to a website known as Let's Buy Spirit, as in Spirit Airlines, which pulled the plug last weekend. You know the story. Several people were left stranded, as these things usually wind up doing, especially if the plug is pulled, quote, suddenly, unquote, quote, although the phones have been rattling for 3 weeks. So if you didn't get a refund or if you didn't make other plans, that's on you. That's on you. Since then, a bunch of, social media people, people with nothing better to do with their time, thought it would be a really great idea if we just, buy Spirit and turn it into the People's Airline. Just like Mickey Rooney used to do back in those MGM musicals. You just tell Judy Garland, hey, let's put on a show. Only this is not an MGM musical, and this is real life. I basically called this idea stupid, which it is, and I started getting backlash, especially from people who usually give me the benefit of the doubt. And of course, one person told me, do your research. Unfortunately for that person, I did. And I do use AI for research. I'm up the front about that. For something like this, I use Claude, the Anthropic AI that Donald Trump hates. I kind of figured that also it would give me the most honest, or at least close to honest, answer to what I was looking for. So basically, I gave him this prompt. Barnstorming. A bunch of people online are working on a plan to buy Spirit Airlines for $500 million. They are seeking pledges from people to raise the money. Now, I don't think it's a workable idea because they have no plan. And they don't. But let's suppose they accomplish this somehow. Considering Spirit's business model before, what would this People's Airline, in quotes, look like? How would this new version differ from the old one? And what would be the realistic chances of something like that being called a success? I know this would be speculation, but I'd like to know if my own thoughts hold water. Claude responded. This is a fun thought experiment. Let me work through this seriously. And by the way, from here on in, I am quoting Claude's readout verbatim. The Spirit they'd be starting with. Spirit's pre-bankruptcy model was a pure ultra-low-cost carrier, or ULCC, bare bones base fares with fees layered on for everything: bag, seat selection, printing of a boarding pass, a bottle of water. These planes were densely configured, the margins were razor thin, even in good times, and the whole machine depended on operational efficiency and volume. It wasn't a beloved brand. It was a price tool. People flew Spirit the way they buy generic medicine, reluctantly, because the number was right. So the people's airline crowd would be inheriting a fleet, some airport slots and gates, maintenance infrastructure, and a brand with roughly the reputation of a DMV waiting room. Continuing, what would likely change and what that costs. The online enthusiasm for this would almost certainly push the new ownership towards a more passenger-friendly model. That means eliminating or reducing the fee stack. This is where Spirit made its money. Removing bag fees, seat fees, etc. feels righteous, but destroys the revenue model almost immediately. You need to raise base fares to compensate, which erodes the one thing Spirit had going for it: better service culture. Fine in principle, but airline labor is expensive and unionized. You can't just goodwill your way towards better service. You pay for it. Democratic governance. This is where it gets genuinely messy. Who decides route strategy, pricing, fleet maintenance schedules? A co-op or crowd-funded model with thousands of stakeholders and no clear decision-making authority is a recipe for paralysis on exactly the questions that need fast, expert answers. And then we get to the money problem, which Claude says is severe. $500 million sounds like a lot, but in airline terms, it's a toehold, not a foundation. Consider, Spirit had $1 billion in debt when it filed for bankruptcy. That does not vanish with the purchase. It gets restructured, but obligations remain. A single narrow-body aircraft like Spirit's A320s costs $25 to $50 million new, and even a lease runs millions per year per plane. Airlines run on working capital. Fuel, labor, and maintenance have to be paid continuously before ticket revenue comes in. $500 million buys the company. It certainly does not necessarily fund operations through the rough first quarter. Airline fuel costs alone for a mid-sized carrier run into the hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and we're not even talking about how high those costs have gone up since, well, since. What success would actually require. For this to work in any realistic sense, you would need 1. Professional management with actual airline expertise. Enthusiasm does not schedule maintenance rotations or negotiate with the FAA. 2. A coherent pricing strategy. It can't be Southwest friendly bundled on Spirit's cost structure without Southwest scale and 50-year operational culture. 3. A realistic governance structure. Probably a board with real authority, not a perpetual stakeholder vote with every decision. 4. Substantial additional capital beyond the purchase price. Probably 200 to 400 million more in operating reserves and near short-term investment. Route rationalization. Spirit had routes that only made sense under its specific fee extraction model. A friendlier version needs to rethink which markets it can actually serve profitably. Sorry about that. As for the realistic chances, honestly, they're pretty low. But the failure mode is interesting. The most likely scenario is not a dramatic crash, it's a slow bleed. The idealism of the founding moment collides with the operational grind of running an airline, one of the hardest businesses in the world already. The governance structure proves unworkable under pressure. Capitalization turns out to be insufficient, and within 2 to 4 years, it's either sold off, merged, or liquidated, with buyers getting pennies on their pledge. And by the way, that's the pledge. The money hasn't come in yet. The scenario where it works is narrow but not zero. If the crowdfunding is essentially just a financing mechanism and actual control is handed to experienced operators who run it as a conventional low-cost carrier with slightly better PR, it could survive. But at that point, the People's Airline concept is mostly a marketing story, not a operational reality. Your skepticism, Don, about the lack of a plan seems founded. In airlines, the plan is the thing, and, quote, we the people will figure it out, unquote, has never successfully run a hub and spoke operation. I thanked Claude for that. I remember when somebody tried to bring back Pan Am several years ago, and that didn't last for even a coffee break. Claude responds, yes, that's a great parallel. And there have actually been a few attempts to resurrect Pan Am over the years, which makes it even more instructive. The name has been revived at least twice in a serious way. One attempt in the early 1990s brought the brand and some assets almost immediately after the original collapse, ran briefly and folded fast. The logic seemed to be that the name had value. Pan Am was genuinely iconic, one of the most recognized brands in aviation history. But brand nostalgia does not fill seats if your operation fundamentals aren't there, and they weren't. This points out to something important about the Spirit situation as well. Spirit does not even have a nostalgia card. Pan Am at least had romanticism going for it. The golden age of aviation, the flying boats, the globe logo. People wanted Pan Am to succeed emotionally. Spirit's brand equity is basically the opposite of that. So the People's Airline boosters would be fighting nostalgia for an airline that nobody misses while trying to simultaneously reinvent its personality. The airline graveyard is enormous and well populated. Braniff, Eastern, Midway, ATA, Independence Air. May I also throw out PSA? May I also point out Northwest Orient or Northwest Airlines? And most of them failed, not because people didn't try hard or care enough, but because the economics are genuinely brutal. Fuel price hikes, labor costs, maintenance requirements, and the fact that customers will leave you for $11 on a competing fare make it an unforgiving business, even for well-capitalized, expertly run operations. The romance of we the people own an airline is real and understandable. The business reality, though, has a way of being completely indifferent to romance. I add, as I did earlier, that these are pledges that they're doing right now, not actual donations, not actual money coming in. And Claude responds, that's a really sharp point that probably doesn't get enough attention in the excitement around this idea. Pledges are not money. There is a massive gap between someone online clicking, I'm in for $500, and that money actually being in an account, legally committed, ready to deploy. Crowdfunding campaigns for much simpler things, like a video game or an album, a product. This podcast routinely fall apart between the pledge and the payment stage. Now scale that into an airline acquisition with a hard deadline, regulatory scrutiny, and counterparties who need certainty before they'll negotiate seriously. Any bankruptcy court or creditor group considering a $500 million offer is going to want proof of funds, not a spreadsheet of internet promises. The moment due diligence starts, the gap between we have pledges and we have capital becomes very visible very fast. And you're right about better uses for the money. $500 million in genuinely committed capital could do things like, say, meaningfully fund several serious startups or small businesses, or endow community institutions for generations, fund infrastructure in well-deserved areas, actually move the needle on causes the same online communities probably care about. Instead, it's being theoretically aimed at one of the most capital-intensive, low-margin, operationally complex industries in the economy. To buy a brand that people mostly associate with hidden fees and uncomfortable seats. The pledge nature of this almost makes the whole thing self-solving, though. When the moment of truth comes to actually wire money, a very large percentage of those pledges will quietly evaporate, which may be the most realistic outcome of all. And that is what AI, aka Claude, said about that. Everything I denied. One of the dumbest ideas in the history of dumb ideas. But then I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question. Let's say you think that everything I just said and over the last 15 minutes were what's your plan? What would be your plan to run a national airline that means a constant influx of money? What's your plan? It's kind of like a lot of things I keep hearing from my side of the road. Let's go out. We'll protest, but what's the plan? What's the goal? Let's boycott. Okay, what's the goal? Punishment? Okay, you punish them. But what's the real end game here? What's the plan? The reason why the Heritage Foundation and that behemoth of a horrible, terrible book of evil, Project 2025, worked is that it was detailed. 900 plus pages. 900 plus pages of detailed executionable plans to basically dismantle everything. And it's working because they printed up the book and they're following the book. All we do is just say, hey, let's do Project 2029. What is it? Well, whatever. Impeach them. You don't even know what that would mean. Or release the PDFs. You don't know what those PDFs contain. You think you do, but you don't. You also don't understand that there may have been something else going on that rock other than what you think happened on that rock. What you think happened on that rock may have happened, and it's evil, but maybe even more evil stuff was being fomented on that rock. Maybe stuff that you and I are dealing with right now that had absolutely nothing to do with something that would wind up on NBC Dateline. I have a motto that I have been using for the last 10 years. D2S2. Don't do stupid shit. And trust me, this is stupid shit. Don't do it. And that's it. We will talk to you soon. Take care.